And today, da-da-da, Evelyn, wave, Evelyn. Today, we honor our only speaker, our memoir writer and FAW board member, Dr. Did you know she was a doctor? Evelyn Latore. With 2 prize-winning successes between Eco Walls and Love in Any Language already on the market, Evelyn is promoting them with speaking gigs and by guesting on podcasts. And at the same time, she's working on her 3rd book and doing workshops on memoir writing and also serving on our own board, which she's been doing for a very long time. But how does she do it? Where does she find the energy? She's about to tell you. And I would like to introduce somebody that we've known for years, and with most of us without even a hint at what a big shot she is.
Oh, I don't know about that. But now that you mentioned energy, the other day I wondered why I was so busy, and I counted up how many groups I belong to, and that I regularly meet with, and there are 13. But that it keeps me busy, but it's like they're the ones that are buying my books, the groups that know me, so it pays off. And plus I enjoy, I'm an extrovert, maybe you kind of guessed that. The other thing I volunteer for whenever there's the opportunity, and I'll get into writing your memoir in a minute, is like the panel that's going to be at the San Francisco Writers Conference, because that means I can go for free for that day anyway, and listen to other people talk too. And that whole panel is talking about the value of belonging to California Writers Club branches. And there are 5 of us. And yeah, my whole career has been shaped because I belong to Fremont area writers. So just a shout out to our own organization. And thank you for inviting me to talk. I have learned so much in the past, well, especially the last 4 or 5 years, about writing memoir, about writing books, about publicizing them. But today I'm just going to try and talk to you about writing your own memoir, which I have really benefited a lot from. First, I kind of wanted to know, before I share my slides, is what levels you are. Like, can you just raise your hand physically if you've already written a memoir and had it published? Is there anybody that's done that? Okay, yes, some of you I know. I know some of you have written other kinds of books. So you know kind of the pathway to doing that. How many have begun, like written a chapter or two, or written anecdotes? That counts. Okay, so a number. Okay, how many want to write your memoir? And I guess the rest are. Well, maybe I'll convince you by the end of this, because I've found out that it's very therapeutic. Okay, I'm going to do the screen share now. Let's see if it works. There it goes. Share.
Ta-da.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Machu Picchu.
I'm going to do a slideshow. If the thing will get out of the way.
It's such a beautiful place.
Well, you know what? I can't get rid of the screen share thing to show. I should have seen. Yeah, this is a problem that people have. I've known before, where I can do the little thing that says stop sharing. Well, maybe I stop share and then I'm going to share again. Okay, let me do stop sharing. Do screen share. Well, we may have to just live with it the way it is. I don't like to show what slides are coming up, but hey, that's it.
No, slideshow
Okay.
should work.
Well, it does, but I can't get to the part that says slideshow, where because the little thing.
About you.
And I'm just moving it. Okay.
You just
Slideshow.
slide-
Right there. There we go.
Yeah, there. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Machu
Oh
Picchu.
no. Are you seeing just the slide?
No,
Big
click on
slide?
it again, and you click on it twice.
Oh,
There we go. Now move. Play from the start.
okay. Start. Okay.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. That's what I want.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. So yes, that is a
Thank you.
picture of Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu. Yeah.
And it's one of the wonders of the ancient world. And it's one of the most amazing Inca constructions that you will ever see. And it got me into trouble in the Peace Corps within 2 months of arriving in the Andes of Peru, where I lived for 18 months. And that's what my first memoir is about. It focuses on the relationships that I developed when I was 22 and 23, and especially a special someone in Peru. I want to do a shout out to Nudie because she helped me when I had a book launch. She helped me with this first book.
Let me just interrupt 1 second. If everybody could mute yourself so we don't get any feedback in the background, please.
Oh, good idea. Okay. So I'm going to be mentioning in depth, if I have time, kind of what I've learned. I'm mentioning a lot of the things that I would have liked to have known before I started writing my memoirs. However, it might have discouraged me, and I don't want to discourage you from doing that. So in the end, I'll give you 7 simple steps to start doing that, but it might get a little more complex because I wanted to be able to talk to all different levels of wherever you are with your writing. So, so first of all, writing a memoir isn't about your whole life. I think some of you probably already know that. It's taking a section of your life, maybe something significant that happened to you. And it's not about all that you did. It's about what you did with it. I've taken a number of classes, including from Jane Cleland, thanks to Nancy's mentioning her quite often. But another person is Marion Roach Smith. And she has a formula that she uses. It's what happened. It's all about X as illustrated by Y to be told in a Z. So the X is just a section of your life. And like I said, my first book is about the 2 years that I was in the Peace Corps and fell in love, and a number of other things happened. But then what happened is I started writing that fairly slowly because I was doing a lot of traveling, and I had just retired is when I really went into it. And I went to a weekend workshop given by the South Bay area writers. And I took all the anecdotes that I had written up, and I thought, how am I going to organize this? And I had a room to myself, and I was able to put my anecdotes in piles that kind of went along with a particular chronologically. I did that, or particularly a particular topic. And that's what really got me thinking that I could write a book. And I remember at that seminar, I came up with the perfect title, From Montana to Machu Picchu. And I thought it was really great. Well, by the time I got to publish, no way did they want that title. So it ended up being Between Inca Walls. So, it's wise to get a lot of assistance. Fremont area writers used to have workshops, and I went to one with Jordan Rosenfeld, and I've gone to like 3 of her presentations to other CWC groups, because you can do that now. You know, if you go into the CWC website and there's a calendar and it says who's speaking about what, and so that helps a lot. Martha Alderson is another one. These are both local ladies who have women who have a lot to say about how you write and making good writing, because you can write any book you want, but if you want anybody to read it, it has to be written so that they will. And as you know, we writers have a lot of competition. TV, people seem to like little snippets better, our iPhones, all the competition that we have. But during COVID, more people were reading books and buying books than before. So that's good. Writing a memoir is a powerful way to find your voice, to tell your story, and to reach out to the larger world and tell them who you are. And it's a process of mining your memories and discovering the most meaningful stories. So why do we write? Well, because it's a powerful way to find your voice and make sense of your life. I had a couple of questions that I had about my life. Joan Didion says she wrote to know what she thought. And it gives you a real insight into your life and where you've been and how you've been. So it changes you. Now, somebody mentioned writing about traumatic situations, and most lives have some trauma to them. I didn't consider that I had a lot of trauma, but I did discover toward the end of Between Inca Walls that there was a trauma that I had not processed. I had written about it in my journal, and I didn't realize that it was traumatic for me. So what they say then is that you need to maybe take it slowly and not write all at once about the trauma, break it up into pieces, and to sometimes you need help with a therapist to process it. But I have to tell you, once you get it off your shoulders, it is like a burden being lifted. And I think it's very therapeutic to go into your life and look to see who you are. The other thing that's so exciting is the connections that you'll find. Like one part of your life is connected to another part of your life, and you really probably haven't stopped to process it. For example, when I was in college, and I think I did put this in my book briefly, I tend to be an impulsive person. And we were in the gym at a tennis lesson, and I decided I was going to jump over the net. Well, I didn't quite make it. My feet got tangled in the net and I fell on my mouth. And before that, I'd never had to go to a dentist, never had a cavity or anything. And one tooth went one way and another tooth went another way. And I went to a friend's dentist and he wired me back together. Well, when I got to Peru, I had an abscess in one of the teeth that had been wired together. And I had to spend a week in the city where the guy I eventually married was. Now, I had just gotten to know him. And because I had that week, I got to know him well enough that we figured to continue our relationship. So it just kind of shows you how things are connected. And that's the delight of writing a memoir, is that you'll find out a lot about yourself. Another thing is when you have your book reviewed, Kirkus Review did a review. And they said something I didn't even know. Oops, it's not in this one. It's in another one. Well, I'll find it. They said something about me being forthright and strong. And I thought, oh, I hadn't thought about that about myself. So the other thing is you'll find out that I've developed a number of fans. And I was at an educators conference the other day, and a woman had read both my books, and she came up to me. She says, I feel like I know you so well. And it's true. She did know me well because she'd read about my life. Now, if you're writing it because you think your family will enjoy it, that's a good motivation. But I have to tell you, first of all, my husband did not want to be in the book. We've been married 56 years. There's no way that my books are not going to say something about him. He didn't want his photograph in the book. And I didn't want a divorce over writing my books. And I had to write. I just needed to write. So we compromised. I changed his name. Most of you know his name isn't Antonio, but it was a good name. But my youngest son said, Mom, I can't read this book with some other guy's name in it. So anyway, my sons haven't really read my books. My second son, I asked him to look through it for mistakes. And so he kind of read it that way. My husband will never read the books and is probably just as well. He's into math and science and prefers other topics, but he supports me because one birthday I got two birthday cards, one with his real name on it, Walter, and the other from Antonio. So anyway, so you'll run into obstacles, but I encourage you to keep going. So you write through trauma, you'll discover strengths, you'll relive joys, wisdom comes from your unconscious. And believe you, sometimes you'll think that you don't have anything to write about, and you do. So let me go on to the next slide. So these are the reasons to write. You want to leave a legacy. When I'm gone, my books will still be around, I hope. Do it now because you're not getting any younger. I had about 6 years ago, I had I call it a peanut in my skull. It was a benign tumor, it turned out, that was in the skull, in my head. So it suddenly dawned on me as I came out of being under anesthetic, I better get to writing, or, I may not get my memoirs written. So start right away. Write it if you've lived a lot. We all have. You can do it to unpack trauma. You can do it to help others. And I've been surprised about that. Many people will identify with parts of both my books. People who are married can see some of the struggles with that in Love in Any Language, a memoir of a cross-cultural marriage. That's the second one. And people that have grown up in the Midwest, my book takes place, I was in Montana, grown up in Montana till I was 16. And your story matters. And particularly for women, men are important too, but there's so many fewer memoirs and biographies of women, because in the past, I guess the writers and the publishers felt that that's who needed to tell their stories. So there's a saying, give somebody a book and they'll read it for a day. Teach somebody to write a book and they'll spend a lifetime mired in paralyzing self-doubt. Because sometimes we regret not doing things as we age. Sometimes these are from research that says the regrets as we age, and it has to do with writing too. But if you've lived the life others expected and you've not been true to yourself, if you've worked too hard and not taken time off, people regret expressing their feelings. People regret not staying in touch with their friends, and not letting themselves be happier. So it's possible to see, appreciate, and change by writing a memoir. Pablo Neruda, a Nobel Prize winner for literature, said he or she dies slowly who doesn't travel, read, listen to music, and isn't enchanted with him or herself. My mother, I tried to get her to write some of her memoirs, or I would write it and she would tell me. And she said, oh, you're not supposed to think about yourself. But that's her generation. That may have been true for them. But nowadays, we are encouraged to write about ourselves. James Pennebaker has done research that shows that memoir writing improves the immune system. It improves your sleep, your mental health, your blood pressure, and it can actually reduce pain. Now, some people think that they don't want to write because they're not a good enough writer. Well, you can take classes for that. They think that they've not had an interesting life. Everybody has had very interesting sections of their lives. And actually, even if you've had what you think is boring, when you analyze it, you can make it very interesting. Some people say they can't remember the past. I happen to be somebody who keeps mementos. I had kept diaries when I was in high school. Unfortunately, my diaries don't tell about teenage angst or boyfriends or anything like that. They mostly say what piece of clothing or shoes I bought and how much I paid for it. So my diary is full of, I bought this pair of white heels and they cost $2.95 or something like that. That's interesting because the prices back then are lower, but that's something I don't think people would read. Okay, another reason that people don't write their memoirs or don't write is because they think nobody will read it. And then the other thing is they're afraid somebody will read it. And there are legal things which we've had speakers talk about that you have to be careful so that you don't slander somebody. Let's see. So you may not want to write everything that about yourself at once. I started with anecdotes, and that's a good way to start. Memoir helps you make sense of your lived experience. It helps you process and reframe using an adult lens, because you look at how you were when you were younger and you now understand it better. And that's one thing that you do in memoir, and I'll probably say it more than once, is you reflect back on how you were and what you've learned from parts of your life. And if you write a truthful memoir, people will know it. You have to write the truth, which can sometimes be painful and interesting at the very least. Possible topics. You could write about anything. You can write about the places or the houses where you've lived, memorable teachers or students that you've had, a special holiday memory, an interesting acquaintance or a relative, about the 6 dogs or cats that you've had and their different personalities, or an event or situation when you overcame difficulties or coming of age. And you might start by thinking in terms of an essay or a short story. Or I just gave a workshop to a group that I went to Mexico with, which is, I mentioned them in the very beginning of my first book. And they started writing letters to the editor because of what I had told them. And you can get published in journals, which is, it just feels good. You can feel very proud when you do that. There is a book, it's called The Memory Book, and I'll go get the authors when I have a minute, but it lists a series of questions. And I started this with my mother, which were asking her about things when she was a child. And I have some of her entries which have helped me with my writing, but she would get to a certain point and she couldn't get past that point. There was something that hurt her very deeply, and she just kept going back to that. So I considered that kind of a trauma for her, and she needed to work through that, and she just could not get beyond that. And then plus she said that you're not supposed to think about yourself, so but she lived to 98. So we all thought a lot about her, and we can write about her. And I do have some of her memories. And that's another topic, writing about your ancestors. And you could write fiction, or you could create creative fiction or nonfiction, creative nonfiction, where you have to kind of imagine things that happened. You could write about the places, the houses where you lived, like I said, and I kind of do that in some of mine. And coming of age, which is what my first book is about, just the 2 years between 22 and 24. You can write it in anecdotes, chunks, you can skip around in time. But when you're writing a memoir, they do caution you to do it chronologically and to center around significant events. So what I did is I joined the National Association of Memoir Writers, that's NAMW.org, and they've been in existence for, I think, 20 years now. Linda Joy Myers is the president of that, and she has several seminars every month, and I faithfully attend those. She also gives classes like write your memoir in 6 months, and you can see on her website what she's been doing. And that was very helpful to know what memoirs are supposed to contain. One of the things I learned is that you need to reflect back on your experiences and give takeaways so that the experiences that you're writing about are seen as universal by the reader. You always have to have the reader in mind. You want to write about things that are universal. I didn't know that when I started writing, and I just started writing about my childhood in Montana, growing up in a small town in southeastern Montana, and then working on ranches that didn't have electricity or plumbing. Not all of them, but some of them I worked on. And then when I got to writing about volunteering in Mexico with a group and then going to Peru, I could fit it all together as to why I didn't have any culture shock that I can remember when I got to Peru because of my life in Montana. Again, that's the connections you'll make. So when I started taking classes with NAMW, I was encouraged to write the highlights. And just a minute, I'm going to get to that one. Okay, this is, I said, the value of writing. It entertains, introduces people to characters and cultures they might not otherwise meet, surprises them, paints a character they relate to, or helps them understand a deeper truth that they never considered. You want to do the specific time period.
You're going too fast.
Oh, okay. Well, these slides will be available on the thing. I only have 45 minutes. So if I'm going to cover things,
Got
don't
it.
try to write it all down. I would say just you can get the slides later and I can go into a little bit more depth also.
Remember, just ask me and I can give you a link to the recording. So you'll see
Thank
everything.
you.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, I'm kind of going a little bit fast because then we'll get to questions about, so I'll know what to go into in more depth. Because I didn't learn to write my memoir by going to a 45-minute talk. I actually went to a lot of classes, but with the hindsight, I can tell you what I thought I would have liked to have learned. So in the beginning, starting off, I didn't even know that you just have to pick out a specific period. I was writing about all kinds of things. Well, it turns out you tend to write what you need to know. And so through NAMW, the classes, it was suggested that you put on Post-it notes the significant points of your life, or what you think are the significant points, the turning points in your life.
Mhm.
And with memoir, you don't have to have a plot, but it is good to have a narrative arc, like where you began, what happened, and then how it was resolved. Americans like happy endings. So it's good if you somehow resolve whatever the trauma was. Like somebody was saying that it's worked out, you're still alive. I mean, if that's the end. I start off my first book with when I was 6 years old, and I went up to explore where some water came from that flooded the ditch that I had to cross to go to school. And then I go through my childhood in Montana, but again, you have to put those in appropriate points to show the character. You want from the beginning, you want people to identify with the character that you're writing about. So like I said, it's about particular period of your life. And then you illustrate that by showing specific characteristics that show the kind of person you are in 2 or 3 examples. And I'm trying to think of an example of, well, I guess my point that I learned was that I'm quite resourceful, because as I wrote and I showed mishaps in my early life and when we went to Mexico, and then I showed how I resolved those. And then I told them in a book. So, so turning points is a major thing that you want to look at. So I did end up with a narrative arc. And I guess I suspected that I would. I put in key scenes. I put them on a big board, the Post-it notes. And I don't remember that I ever looked at them again. They somehow were inside of me as I wrote. Now, they say when you write, there are plotters, people who will do an outline, and that's highly recommended. Or there are what are called pantsers. And I'm what's called a pantser because I just write whatever comes up. And then I put it in some kind of an order later. But more and more things will come up as you write. You'll remember more and more items. And then as you put it together, you will begin to show how things are connected, and then how you transformed, how those events transformed you. So remember that the setting that you put it in, like I start off in Montana, and then I move to Mexico, and then I moved to Peru. That's also character. The reader needs to feel like they're there, and they know that because you write in scenes. And let me give you an example of a scene, if I can find one. Well, this is inciting incident. That one reviewer said, wow, as soon as I read this, I had to keep reading. And it'll be brief. I wiped the dust from the window of the Peace Corps truck and looked down. The Appomattox River meandered 5,000 feet below me. My stomach fluttered. On November 2, 1964, 3 days before my 22nd birthday, I was in the Andes Mountain with my new roommate, Marie, on my way to Abancay, Peru. And then I ended that. I go on and I describe more about how precarious it was. And then I analyzed it. I said, encountering new places had always filled me with excitement. Despite the dangers, the anticipation of a new discovery left me breathless. I wanted to explore more Hispanic cultures ever since living in Mexico the summer after my junior year in college. That 1963 adventure landed me in my current situation. And though I had numerous pleasant memories of that time, the trip to Mexico also had a perilous beginning. Now, that's the other thing you want to do. I just took a class, free classes. There are free classes all over the internet. And this was on hooks. And the woman said, not only do you start your book with a hook, the first chapter, you need to end it with a hook so people keep reading. You keep baiting the reader because they want to know more. You don't want them to put the book down, because if they do, they might not finish it. Another class that I took, several classes from Charlotte Cook, and she ended up being my developmental editor for the first book and through half of the second book. And she had us get a mystery. I don't read a lot of mysteries, but I got the book. And she says, at the bottom of each page, I want you to write why you would go on to the next page. So in the beginning, you write what you need to write. Just go ahead and let it all out. I have a thing here. I can't tell if you can see this or not, but I'll read it by William Faulkner. He says, get it down, take chances. It may be bad, but it's the only way you can do anything really good. So I'm going between telling you specific things, but still trying to encourage you to write what you need to write and learn about how to write a book that people will read. So one event builds on the last one for complexity. And then when you get through writing all your anecdotes, you identify what's missing. And then you need to have a theme and or two or three minor themes, subplots that build into one major conflict. Like in my second book, the theme was, will this marriage survive, pretty much. And so I keep mentioning bumps along the way and how they were resolved. And then the end of that second book, somebody really liked the end of it. And I'm not giving anything away because, you know, I have been married for 56 years, but I had kept, there's a picture, again, I don't know if you can see a picture of a torn dollar bill. That's in the last page. And it says, sitting on a bench in Abancay, Peru on a spring 1966 evening, Antonio and I agreed that our union would be impossible. He asked me to give him one of my US dollars. I wondered why he wanted the currency not usable in Abancay stores. I pulled out a crinkled dollar bill from among the Peruvian soles in my purse. Antonio took it and tore it in half. You keep one half, he said with tears in his eyes, and I'll keep the other half. Maybe one day the two halves will come together, maybe not. If not, there'll be reminders of what once was possible. I took my half and my eyes watered too. The symbolism of his act struck me. We'd each have half of something of value that was worth nothing by itself. The only way the paper dollar would be worth anything was if the two parts were put together. We have put the two halves together, and today in our home, the bill and our lives are whole. Now, I could have carried, well, actually, the sub-theme of money and difficulties with finances is a theme in the second book. So when you're writing your memoir, you want to know what kicked off your crisis or your memory, you know, what happened, and then what's at stake. Like in my second book, is marriage is at stake. And in the first one, my reputation is kind of at stake, but also, you know, deciding whether I'm going to marry or not is what's at stake. And then you weave in the backstory, you bring the reader into the moment, you create a scene as though it's happening in real time. And I was going to read one of those, but there are plenty of books that you jump right into the scene. And these are things that you will learn as you're going. You don't want to have too many flashbacks. Again, when you first start writing about your life, you've got to let people know who you were so that they know who you are today, but you don't want it to be disorienting. And that's why I'm saying chronological structure the best. You start with, where the incident began, and then you keep building on it. But you can have flashbacks, and you can remember things that help explain what it is your theme is. You don't put it in just because it happened. My developmental editor, Charlotte Cook, and I worked for weeks to perfect the first 3 chapters of my book. And I ended up taking 2 of those chapters out because they just didn't fit after we had spent months perfecting them. I may put them there. They're not on my website yet. I may put them on my website, but so you will write a lot that you will need to throw out. It's called killing your darlings. So you don't put it in just because it happened, but you when your first draft, you can put everything in that you can remember. I don't know if you've seen the movie Minari, but the man who wrote that just sat down and listed all the memories that he could of his childhood, and it ended up being a book and a movie. But I am encouraging you along the way to take classes and workshops and belong to, take advantage of the writers clubs. So you've got the turning points in your life, then you've got a narrative arc. You need to have what the major conflict is, and you may not know that in the beginning, but it'll come to you. Yeah, like I said, it's not plot driven, it's a theme. And you want to make meaning out of seemingly meaningless events. So I didn't even know what was going to be important until I had pretty much written a whole lot. Let's see, I said I eliminated 3 chapters. Don't use too many examples of how things were. Like if you had an alcoholic parent, for example, you can mention several examples of that, but and when you're first writing it, you can get out a lot of venom and a lot of unhappiness that you have, but people get tired of reading about bad things all the time. So you will want to temper that with something positive that happened. Re-anchor the reader. When you go to a flashback, you have to bring them back to where you are in the story. And the best is to make it a scene or to use dialogue, because that puts your reader right into the scene right away. Your story will change. You'll take out material, you'll shift your focus, and the focus eventually you need to think of what you like to read. That's what I do often. I think, now, if I were a reader of this, would I like it? We write what we need to know. Unresolved issues will show up, and you will have a deeper experience than just talking about the past. So the other thing is you will learn eventually that you don't tell the reader how to feel, for example, or even how you felt. It's best not to just say, I felt angry. You want to describe how that was. My breathing became noisy and I cracked my neck. And there are books that will help you do this. There's an emotional thesaurus, and there are several books that you can get that will tell you physical characteristics if you're feeling angry or sad or things like that. You also don't want to just write a memoir to justify your behavior, because people don't want to read a whole bunch of defensive things, that I was justified in doing this because this happened. So do we have any questions at this point?
I have one.
Okay.
Most of the places that I've gone to for classes, they're all creative writing. And so I leave because I think I don't want to make up stuff. I want to deal with what the story is. So, or do you use creative writing also?
Well, you won't remember the exact words that somebody used, but as long as you get the feeling there, it's considered honest. Trying to think. I have some dialogue examples, but yeah, it's acceptable. You don't put in what isn't true emotionally. The other thing is you don't have to put everything in. There are very significant things that I left out, just and people do this all the time, because this is going to be out there for everybody to read. And
Yes.
so you know, you want it to be out there. I have a saying that I got off of someplace. It says, writing is like making love. If you get a response, you'll get better. So as you write,
For sure.
people will respond. And this is particularly helpful to have groups. I have had great critique groups. They may be writing different things. It doesn't mean that they all have to be writing memoir. In fact, it's probably good that they aren't, but they kind of represent the readers of your books, and they will make lots of suggestions as to how to improve. I don't know how anybody would, except maybe movie stars who have their books ghostwritten, would write a book by themselves.
Yeah.
Most of us have critique groups. Another is writing a memoir is like painting a self-portrait. You notice all the defects and the beauty. And that's the other thing, is you have to be honest, and you have to mention things that you did wrong or that aren't particularly attractive. So I actually hadn't realized how what a strong personality I seem to have. And I guess that comes across in my books. And I've not gotten all positive reviews. My worst review is a 1-star review that said, "Oh, her story sounds like a soap opera." And
Right.
well, maybe that'll sell some books, you know. I mean, it isn't, I don't, and nobody else thinks it's like a soap opera. And I don't think the person read the book. It was somebody who said she was in the Peace Corps and nobody's ever heard of her, and that she's no list that she's there, but she didn't like the way I talked about falling in love in my first book while I was in the Peace Corps, instead of just saying what we did in the Peace Corps. But there's plenty in my book that says what it was like and what I did there, other than fall in love. You limit adjectives. The other day I read something that said, try not to put adjectives in at all. But again, when you're writing in the beginning, forget that, because you want to make people feel like they're present. And eliminating adverbs is pretty much accepted. Like, you don't say I walk slowly. You say something like, I meandered over to the book and picked it up and, you know, read, or something like that. You describe what you did. And you keep looking. The more you write and rewrite, you look for better ways to express. You vary the sentence length, the rhythm of the language, and you give the reader a reason to turn the page. And then you have other people read it. For my second book, I had several people read it and make suggestions as to what I could cut out, because the average length of a memoir, especially a first memoir, it shouldn't be much more than 85,000 words. And I had gone like to 95,000, and I needed to cut things. And so I had written a chapter about the murder of my husband's cousin. And it's an interesting chapter, but it just didn't fit with the theme of, you know, will this marriage survive? So I took it out. And then you stop tinkering and you get it published. And that's a whole other talk, is about, you know, getting things published. And I could go on and on about that. I went with someone who I knew about, Brooke Warner. She Writes Press, because she worked for Seal Press, and she was an acquisitions editor, and she kept recommending women's books, probably a lot of memoirs, to the higher ups, and they kept passing on perfectly good books. So she started her own company, She Writes Press, and she's published over 1,000 now of books by women. And but your rewards are not necessarily monetary. There are very few writers that I know, again, unless you're famous, who make back the amount that they have spent, because there's layout. You can do a lot of these things yourself, but now the printing costs have even gotten more, they cost more. And but the rewards are when your mind is put to a creative use, the sense of sensation and freedom is off the charts. And I had another saying here that I was going to tell you, I can't find it, but anyway, it has to do with art and creativity. And especially as we get older, it really keeps the wheels going in your mind. And the constraint of what you thought was possible is expanded. I mean, I really didn't see my books as being printable and printed. And I certainly didn't know I would put this much time and effort into it, but it's been marvelous. I mean, I have really enjoyed it. And I enjoy thinking about it, and I enjoy continuing to work. So when you know something when you can put it into words, put your thoughts into words and set it up in a phrase or a paragraph. And so I wrote the first book. I just, took me time to write it. The second book, it took me a year to write. Now, that wasn't such a good timing either, because if you want to sell your book, a lot of effort goes into selling it. And so I was selling my first book right as I was perfecting my second book and editing it and getting it ready for publication. But it's worked out because a lot of people, like the president of National Association of Memoir Writers, read my book, and I've been on her program. She has a podcast. Well, no, it's a Zoom meeting now. And I was on it in March, I think. But when she got to the end of my first book, she was disappointed because she says, well, what happened after the wedding? So I was already writing my second book. So that's what my second book is about, what happened. And the two books seem to sell one another. People can read the second book first, and then they wonder, well, how did they even get together? And so then they read the first one, or they read the first one and think, well, what happened after the wedding? And then they read the second one. So like I said, the second book was easier. There's another thing I didn't expect is that the first book has won a first place in uplifting and inspiring nonfiction by SIBA. And even more valuable is the Peace Corps Writers gave it an experience award just recently. So that really is kind of my reward. And the second one was just made a Book Excellent Award. There's a whole lot of awards that you can apply for, and some you don't apply for, and they just come. And so that's very pleasant. And I am about to have a chapter published in an anthology. During COVID, one of the She Writes Press writers put out the word, do you want to write a chapter in this book, Art in the Time of Unbearable Crisis? And that comes out this week. And one of the positive things is I'll get a couple of free copies from that. But it sounds like it's going to be a really interesting book. And see, my chapter is Art in the Time of Chaos is my chapter on that. And my next book, once you start writing, at least for me, I can't stop. Now, it so happens like I'd written 2 chapters past the wedding when my editor said, Evelyn, you stop at the wedding. And so I did. And I took the 2 chapters that I had written and just kept writing. And that